That's where we begin a look at our top stories. Just moments ago, we all watched as Maduro and his wife left the detention center in Brooklyn. They're now en route to the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Over the weekend, they were captured and brought to the U.S. after a military operation which took place on Saturday. They now face federal drug trafficking and weapons charges. Maduro has denied those allegations. President Trump is doubling down, saying the U.S. is, quote, in charge of Venezuela after the military operation. It's not entirely clear what that means, but Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says it means President Trump will set the terms.
Dealing with the people, we're dealing with the people that just got sworn in. And don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
Because we're in charge.
President Trump sets the terms. Ultimately, we're going to control what happens next because of this brave decision. President Trump has shown American leadership, and he'll be able to dictate where we go next.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the oil quarantine on Venezuela gives the U.S. leverage over what happens next there. He argues Venezuela's oil industry is backwards, but Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen told Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation President Trump is just trying to give billionaire donors a payday.
Those things are decrepit. They're bankrupt. They need to be reinvested in. It's obvious. They do not have the capability to bring up that industry again. They need investment from private companies who are only going to invest under certain guarantees and conditions.
This, from the beginning, has been about getting rid of Maduro, grabbing Venezuela's oil for American oil companies and Trump's billionaire buddies. That's what this is about.
President Trump is renewing calls for the U.S. to take over Greenland for defense purposes. Mr. Trump has frequently mentioned annexing the Danish territory. Denmark's prime minister is now strongly urging the U.S. to, quote, stop the threats. And we have a team of correspondents covering every angle of the Venezuela story. Matt Gutman on the left of your screen is at court in New York City awaiting Maduro's arraignment. But let's begin with Weijia Jiang at the White House. Weijia, good morning to you. What might the future of Venezuela look like? We heard the U.S. president there say the U.S. is in charge, but he also said he's speaking with the country's new leader, Delcy Rodriguez, who was Maduro's number 2. So who really is in charge and what happens next?
Well, Errol, at this point, it depends on who you ask. And you're right that if that is President Trump, he is doubling down on the U.S. running Venezuela, although he has yet to offer many specifics, like for how long that would last and whether it would involve a U.S. military occupation. But, Errol, it is quite clear that the president wants America to play a significant role in reshaping the next chapter of Venezuela. And even though leading up to Maduro's capture, he was really stressing the efforts to counter narco-terrorism. There's a lot more now on the table because he has captured Maduro and is not contradicting the aim for regime change. And he is also focusing heavily on Venezuela's rich oil reserves, not making not trying to beat around the bush when it comes to the U.S.'s desire to correct and to operate the oil infrastructure, Errol, that he says is crumbling. So in terms of how that's all going to play out and how they are going to work with the current regime is unclear, because the president has issued threats to the current acting president of Venezuela, that is Delcy Rodriguez, who you mentioned. And initially, when Maduro was captured, she said, look, the only president of Venezuela is Maduro. But she has since softened that after hearing from President Trump saying that she ought to cooperate or else she could face consequences even worse than Maduro. And she now says that she invites the U.S. for collaboration and cooperation on the next steps in her country. Errol.
All right, Weijia Jiang with the latest at the White House. Thank you, Weijia.